For today's video, I want to talk about training metrics, what they mean, how to use them, which ones to ignore, and which ones you should be paying attention to. Metrics and data are a tool that we can use to help guide our training. They, of course, shouldn't be used in isolation, but in combination with one another to give a better understanding of the overall picture. And in training, we often use them to make sure you're doing the training correctly and to make sure the training is actually benefiting you, so you're getting faster. Relying on one metric alone can totally misrepresent training. For example, if we were to look at the average power for these two rides, they look the same, but they have totally different effects and training stimulus. This first one includes repeated bouts of sprint efforts, and the second one is 2 steady state efforts. If we were to only look at the average power, we wouldn't really be able to tell what type of ride this was. But if we add another metric like normalized power, we start to get a better understanding of the total picture and what type of stress this ride puts on our body. It's crucial to use all the available data to best inform your training and recovery. It can be good practice to combine both internal and external metrics when assessing readiness to train and our responses to that training. Some examples of this include comparing heart rate to power. So you have an internal measure, which is your heart rate, which fluctuates based on things like heat, stress, sleep, training, nutrition, and then power, which is an external metric being measured from the outside. So you can look at your heart rate for a given power. Is it in the normal range? Is it too low, too high? And then you can compare this against things like your RPE, or your rate of perceived exertion. So if you go out for a nice steady ride and you see that your heart rate's at 180 beats per minute, when it feels like you're going relatively chill, that might be a sign that there's something going on inside of your body, signaling that you're not ready for training. Or you could have the inverse, where you have a really low heart rate at a very high RPE, signaling that you might have some type of other issue going on. Referencing multiple metrics throughout a ride is really important to make sure that you're giving yourself the best possible opportunity for judging your readiness. Keeping this in check ensures that your body's ready to take on strain and can handle it. So now that we got that squared away, let's start talking about these training metrics. The first one is average power. Average power is a measure of all your power values across a ride divided by time. So it's a great representation of the total amount of work you've done, but it doesn't always tell you how hard the ride was accurately, because average power gets brought down when you're not pedaling or you're coasting, so it doesn't always represent the efforts within a ride accurately. If you go out and you do a super hard couple sprints and then you kind of coast for the rest of the ride, the average power is going to get brought down significantly. Now that's where the second metric, normalized power, comes into play. Normalized power is smoothed over 30 seconds and hard efforts are weighted differently. This means that on a ride with a lot of variance, so a lot of sprints or hard efforts, the normalized power value will be much higher than the average power value. This usually does a better job at representing the physiological stress that you're feeling throughout a race or a ride than average power. Because let's say you go out and you do a 45-minute crit where every lap you're sprinting multiple times, but the rest of the time you're coasting in and out of the group, it's still going to put a lot of strain on your body, but the average power might not represent that as well as normalized power. So it's always important to bounce these off each other. The next metric we're going to look at is work. Work is the total amount of energy that you produced throughout a ride. The basic idea is that work equals power times time. It's reported in kilojoules and closely matches calories burned on the bike. Work does not care about how easy or hard the ride felt, it's just a measure of how much energy you used over time. The next one is IF, or intensity factor. This tells you how hard the ride was in relation to your FTP. It compares your normalized power to your FTP. So if your FTP is 300 watts and you normalized 300 watts, that ride would be an IF of 1.00. And if you went out and you normalized 150 watts and your FTP was 300, then your IF would be 0.5. I use this metric to quickly reference how much intensity you did throughout a ride. If I prescribe a hard workout, I expect to see a higher IF. If I prescribe an endurance ride, I hope it's within the 0.6 to 0.7 range. But again, the basic idea is that your intensity factor is just your normalized power divided by your FTP. And if these things are not set correctly, like your FTP is too low or your FTP is too high, we'll see a mismatch between your IF value at the end of a ride and the goal of the ride. If your FTP is too low, you'll often see a really high IF number for endurance rides or easy rides. And if your FTP is too high, high, you might see a really low IF number. Calculating this is really important because it determines your TSS score. TSS stands for Training Stress Score, and it combines how long and how hard you rode into one number. TSS basically equals time times intensity. So if you were to ride at 100% of your FTP for 1 hour, you should theoretically end up with 100 TSS. And once again, if your FTP is set incorrectly, you're going to be accumulating a lot more TSS per hour than you really should have, which may inflate other values and lead to inaccurate reporting of how fit or how unfit you are. We'll talk about this more in a minute. The next one is VI, or Variability Index. This describes how steady or variable your pacing was throughout a ride. It compares normalized power to average power. So a low VI means steady, smooth pacing, like an easy endurance ride or a solid, steady state time trial. And a lot of variability means that it was a very surgy ride and there were lots of spikes and changes in effort. Certain rides you expect a higher VI and other rides you expect a lower one. If I ask you to go out and do a steady 2-hour endurance ride, I hope there's not a lot of variation in the power, because the goal of that ride is to remain steady in zone 2. The next one we're going to look at is EF, or efficiency factor. Shows you how much power you produce for a given heart rate. Again, it's linking external output, your power, to internal load, which is your heart rate. The basic idea is that efficiency factor is normalized power divided by average heart rate. If EF increases over time, it means you're producing more power at a given heart rate. This is often a sign of improved aerobic fitness. Now let's quickly talk about the 3 main numbers that you see every time you open up Training Peaks. Your fitness, or your CTL, which stands for chronic training load, your form, or your TSB, training stress balance, and your ATL, your acute training load, or your fatigue. Let's start off with fitness. This is the number everyone's always looking at. Oh, my fitness went down, my fitness went up. So let's explain how it actually works. The basic idea is that your fitness is a measure of your daily TSS over the last 6 weeks. So raising your CTL, or your fitness, means that you're accumulating more training stress over time. It changes slowly and reflects your training over time, not your daily readiness. The acute training load, or your fatigue, represents a rolling average of your daily training stress over the last 7 days. It responds very quickly to hard training and drops fast with rest. And then the last one is form. Form is a measure of your fitness minus your fatigue. It's calculated by subtracting your short-term fatigue by your long-term fitness. By looking at this graph here, you can see the relationship between fatigue, fitness, and form. You can see that as fatigue increases, form drops, and fitness slowly rises over time. You cannot endlessly chase fitness either, as the amount of fatigue that you need to accumulate continues to build and build over time, and it becomes physically impossible to reach certain levels of fitness. One of the most common mistakes I see is people chasing fitness numbers instead of sticking to prescribed workouts and structured training. Fitness, fatigue, and form are useful models, but they describe trends rather than moment-to-moment physiology. They do not account for sleep, nutrition, stress, illness, or environmental conditions, all of which strongly influence performance. Because of this, numbers should be interpreted alongside subjective markers like perceived effort and recovery, not in isolation. The goal is not to chase perfect metrics, but to use them as context to make better training decisions over time.